Welcome to the 9th video in our series, Understanding Inflation and Escalation in Defense Acquisition, Best Practices for Cost Analysis. Today, we will present an overview on how the Department of Defense utilizes the weighted and raw indexes to support the development of certain figures in cost estimates and budgets. Let's begin. Let's say you're performing a cost estimate for the Department of Defense and you need to adjust cost values. While the Department of Defense will provide a weighted inflation index to suit your needs, it is unlikely that you will be provided a weighted escalation index. This video will help you understand the difference between raw and weighted indexes and how to calculate your own weighted escalation index. Recall the concept of a price index from the first video in our series. A price index depicts the rate of change over a period of time for the price of a class of goods or services. In the earlier video, we discussed two types of price indexes, escalation and inflation, and how these indexes support developing cost figures and cost estimates. Whether you're adjusting costs with an escalation index, such as developing CERs, or adjusting with an inflation index, such as an affordability analysis, you will need to know the concepts of raw and weighted indexes. A raw index reflects the change in value from one year to the next. It is used to normalize for the effects of price changes. A weighted index is created specifically to account for the additional costs of price change expected to be incurred from expenditures beyond the year of obligation. So what exactly are raw and weighted indexes used for? First, raw indexes are used to normalize expenditures at a specific point in time, whereas weighted indexes are used to normalize obligations where dollars provided in one year will be spent over a period of years. Before we move from defining these indexes to calculating them, we next need to understand the difference between expenditures and obligations. So, what are expenditures and obligations? To start, expenditures are transactions that occur at a specific point in time. For example, if I want to buy a computer from an electronics store, I pay the price of the computer, and the merchant gives me a computer. In this example, the transaction occurs and it is completed at a point in time. Please note that the term expenditure is frequently used interchangeably with the term outlay. Obligations represent dollars which will be spent over a period of time. They are binding agreements that will result in outlays immediately or in the future. Unfortunately, there's no store the government can go to buy ready-made submarines, so the government must contract with a firm to produce submarines, which may take several years to build after the agreement. And because these products may take several years to produce, if the government didn't account for the expected amount of price change over the construction period, then they would be severely underfunding the production. Because the firm will be expending dollars over several years to build a submarine, the amount of dollars the government obligates must include the amount of price change expected to occur. Before we jump into creating a weighted index, let's quickly define the term base year, which we discussed in an earlier video. A base year is the year used as a basis of comparison whenever an index is calculated. Using a base year helps an analyst normalize data for consistent comparison across years. If we had a period of 20 years that we wanted to calculate an index for, and we wanted to compare everything relative to the first year, then that first year would be our base year. We should also note that when calculating raw indexes, the base year always has an index value of 1. Now that we've gone over definitions and explanations, let's open up Microsoft Excel and review how to develop a weighted index. Next, let's explore how to create a weighted index. First, we need a raw index, starting with a value of 1 in the base year, which will be 2005 in this example. We're going to suppose the index pertains to the cost changes of U.S. Navy ships, which for simplicity will increase at a constant rate of 3% per annum. Using this information, we can calculate the raw index for the subsequent years, 2006 through 2020. To do this, we take the previous index value and multiply it by 1 plus the escalation rate of 0.03. We then drag the formula down, which provides us the complete listing of raw indices from 2005 to 2020 for U.S. Navy ships. If you look at the year 2020, you can see that the value is 1.558. This means that U.S. Navy ships cost 55.8% more in current year dollars in 2020 than they did in 2005, assuming the quality of a U.S. Navy ship is constant over that time. Note that escalation indexes are often quality or content constant. This means that performance increases due to new or more advanced subsystems that are excluded. An important assumption that necessitates a weighted index is that U.S. Navy ships often take several years to produce because they are large and complex items. Let's say for simplicity that a U.S. Navy ship on average will be produced over the course of 4 years. Let's further assume that 25% of the cost of the ship is expended in each of the 4 years. How do we create a weighted index from this information? First, we must determine what the weighted index value for our base year is. For 2005, this can be done by starting the outlay rate for year 1, 25%, divided by the raw index for 2005, which is 1. We can drag this formula down for each of the 4 years in the outlay profile, and we will get the de-escalated values for the proportions in each year for a total obligation in 2005. Well, in the first year, because there's no escalation that has occurred, that has the purchasing power of 25 cents. But what happens in year 2? We give the contractor 25 cents to expend in year 2. However, escalation has occurred over the time period, such that the 25 cents has been eaten away by 3% through escalation, and the contractor feels as if they only receive 24.3 cents of what was expected. This logic continues throughout the 4 years. In year 4, the contractor is only receiving 22.9 cents of value from what was 25 cents due to the cumulative escalation of 9.3% over 2005 price levels. If we sum the values, we can find that the contractor is only receiving 95.7% of the dollars they needed to produce the Navy ship due to the escalation that has occurred between 2005 and 2008. In order to provide the contractor enough money to produce the end product, we'll need to convert the $1. We take 1 divided by the sum of the de-escalated values, 0.957, and that yields the weighted index value of 1.045, meaning that if we wanted to provide the contractor with enough funds to fill the production order over 4 years with an outlay rate of 25% each year, we'll need a budget for $1.045 for every dollar of purchasing power we need them to have in 2005 terms. So, how do we find the weighted index value for each and every year? At this point, we have only provided the weighted index for 2005. We can generalize by observing that the weighted index value is the reciprocal of the weighted sum of the reciprocals of the raw indices across the given range of years, where the weights are given by the outlay profile. For you math geeks out there, this is called the weighted harmonic mean. We can cleverly encapsulate this in a single Excel array formula. We take 1 divided by the sum of the outlay rates divided by the respective raw index values, and we Control-Shift-Enter to enter that formula as an array. And we note that our weighted index value for 2005 corresponds to what we previously calculated using more spreadsheet geography. When we drag the formula down, the raw index range will also shift down appropriately. For example, the 2006 weighted index pulls from the raw indices for 2006 through 2009, the years needed to produce a ship starting in 2006. We will not get the 2018 weighted index value because the 4-year outlay profile means an obligation in 2018 will have expenditures extending to 2021, for which we do not have a raw index value. If we extend the formula one more down, you will see that the outlay rates are the same, but the raw index is now including a missing value. Of course, in the simplified example, we can always generate raw indices under the constant escalation assumption, but it remains a practical constraint that we require raw indices projected further into the future than weighted indices. Thank you for watching. This concludes video 9 in our series, Understanding Inflation and Escalation in Defense Acquisition, Best Practices for Cost Analysis. For more information or additional resources on how inflation and escalation are used in defense acquisition, please visit our website at cade.osd.mil/policy/inflation.